Hey guys, well thanks for purchasing custom time access. Welcome aboard. What I want to do is run through the indicator right now and try to give you a real quick overview of the inputs, sort of fill in maybe some of the gaps that you may not see in the manual, as well as if you don't like reading manuals, all you have to do is follow along in this video and you'll be up to speed in no time. So again, thanks for choosing custom time access. I think you will never be sorry. So basically, everything I've tried to think that was time related, I've put into this indicator. I have a lot of great suggestions come from local time access users, which was predecessor to custom time access. And I thank all you guys for those inputs. If you're one of those people, then hopefully you're enjoying CTA right now that you now have on your computer and experiencing some of your suggestions. I also put some things in that I also thought were kind of interesting, and I'm already thinking of some great things for the next version. And in that regard, if you have any suggestions, by all means, go ahead and email that to me, and I'll work on getting that in the next version. But I think this one is pretty doggone thorough. That has everything in it has anything to do with time, but I welcome additional suggestions. Okay, I've done my best to make this indicator as seamless and transparent, easy to use as possible. Local time access users know that there are certain things you got to get in there and tweak and modify and always adapt to make sure that the indicator is looking as clean as possible in different time frames and compressions and all that. That's all done automatically now, which is really slick in the current version. Okay, so it really comes down to the inputs. It is called custom time access, of course, and so I'm going to go through all the ways of customizing it. You can pretty much read what I have here in the table of contents. Pretty straightforward stuff. You can, of course, just go along with this video. I'm going to be following along with the manual, so everything should be cross-referenced with what you're seeing in print and what I'll be talking about as well. I won't go through the installation, of course, because I'm assuming you've already done that, as those were separate instructions. And so let's just skip through both of the versions of the pre-600 or post-600 builds. Those of you that have been around when that less than ceremonious upgrade occurred, I might still be recovering from that because some EAs and indicators stopped working. But this is backward compatible if you are using the pre 600, or I should say, yeah, pre 600 builds. I think 600 was still compatible, but when they went up from there is when things started going crazy. But anyway, everything should run smooth with this indicator. There's a shot of your inputs where it, of course, all happens, all the customization, just like every indicator, I'm sorry. And to be sure, it is an indicator at the end of the day. So it's going to operate just like every other indicator with one cool little aspect which you've already noticed, which is the fact that we literally have designed this so that we can literally replace visually the MetaTrader time axis with CTAs. So there is essentially your inputs in a screenshot, and two different ways of bringing up the indicator, of course, whether you're putting it up for the first time or it's already on your chart. If you bring it up for the first time, the input tab screen comes right up, or right click on the chart and choose indicator and edit, and then it'll bring you in, and then choose the inputs tab to bring up these inputs. Okay, so let's start to run through them now very quickly. I'm going to click over on a chart. Now this is what you're seeing. This is what the indicator looks like right out of the box, so to speak, with some things activated. And you may not want it like this, but I figured most people might like to just see it sort of in this excuse me, configuration, just slapping it on a chart. But what I'm going to do to begin to educate now for the different inputs is I'm actually going to put on here a sort of a stripped down version, which actually is not stripped down, but has certain functions turned on in order to make it look stripped down. I don't know if that makes sense or not. Now I've applied this as a template, and you will receive this basic template along with everything else, or I should say you've already received it. And so what I've done here is showing you so that you can just see it again. You might have seen this in some of the promotional videos. You can make this look exactly like the native time axis if you like. And if you really like the way that looks, then great. Just go ahead and use the basic template. And of course, you may not want to be looking at double, but I just wanted to show you that for comparison's sake, that it is basically the same thing. And so, as far as the look goes, and so starting off on the first input, if you want to get rid of the native axis and replace it with CTA, and then we'll go ahead and tweak it for our local time and all the other things. But if you like the way that looks, start off with the basic template, and then of course just go in here and start up on your first input and change that to true. In other words, you want to hide the main. Main simply means the MetaTrader native axis. You want to hide that, so you want to click that to true. So if you look down below, what you're going to see is this double axis was going to be replaced with a single, and that single is going to be CTA. So there's custom time axis showing right there, but it's doing it in military time just like the native axis, and it's referencing the broker time right there. Now, I'm on the west coast of the United States, which is Pacific Standard Time. This is a 15-minute chart here, and so what I want to do is move this, change this, I should say, to a 1-minute chart, because the time which shows up down here is actually according to this little vertical tick mark, and that's just like the native axis. The time you see is actually what lines up with this little tick, and so it's the same way in CTA. But we want to be referencing the current bar that's forming, because it's going to be easier to stay congruent, right? As we're flipping back and forth and showing you different things, congruent with the actual time, and you don't want to have to sit there and do any more calculations based upon, if you're on a 5-minute or a hourly chart or what have you, because that is actually the start time of the bar that you're seeing there. But what we want to do again is go to the actual current time. So to see that time, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. You can use the cursor or the crosshair. In the native program, the only way you see the time popping up at the bottom is with the crosshair. With custom time axis, you can use the cursor or the crosshair. And if you want to move your cursor up in the main chart space, all you have to do is hit the control key, and then you can see the time showing up as a pop-up down below as well. Release the control key, that disappears. There was just no way to code this for some reason any other way. So either way you want to look at it, you have the ability to do it. So as you can see, 21:22, that's the broker time. I'm using FXCM, which is 10 hours ahead of my local Pacific Standard Time right now, again during daylight savings time. So for comparison, let's just start off with this right now. So we have our first input already explained, right? And so now the next thing you may want to do, and some people have probably picked up custom time axis for no other reason except the fact that they don't like always having to calculate in from military time. So we can switch that over to AM PM. We'll do that as our next modification. Now, obviously we're at 21:21, that's military time, so let's view the broker's time in AM PM rather than 24 hours. So let's go ahead and click OK. You'll see that change to actually 21:22, so that's going to be a P that comes up, right? And it's going to be in normal time. There we go, 9:22 p.m. So again, we're 10 hours ahead of where I'm at on California time, and that translates to, or I should say from, however you want to look at that, it's 11:22:23 right now a.m. So let's go back here now and start to show my local time, and that's going to be our next input. That's how we see our local time. It assumes that your computer clock is set to your local time, and seems to be a pretty straightforward, elegant solution, right? It assumes, again, that your local time is what you have your clock set to. Now, that was easier said than done to actually create that, to do that, which explains why we're probably not seeing these indicators all over the internet for free in forums, etc., because it was very tricky to make that happen. So if we click OK, we're now going to see this in translated to my Pacific Standard Time. So there we go, 11:23 when you click OK. Now, no matter where you're at in the world, your computer will, or I should say CTA, will show the local time when you click on that input to be true. Now, the great thing about this, you might be running numerous broker platforms on your computer, and as you already know, if you're trying to stay consistent and congruent time-wise, it's not going to happen with the native access, because those are all going to show the individual broker times down there. It could drive a person wacky if you're always trying to convert back and forth different charts, different platforms, etc., etc. Well, with CTA, it's no longer a problem. Just throw it on the chart, no matter what indicator, what platform you're looking at. It's going to come up consistent with your local time, which is very sweet. Which means all of your templates that you design, everything is going to be truly universal in terms of running it on whatever platform you put it on, if you have it synced to your local time. But let's move ahead into the next input here. I want to talk about these offsets. Depending upon what you have this synced to, if it's synced to clock true or false, depends which of these offsets will become activated and functional. So if you want to offset from the broker, you cannot have sync to clock true. You want to go back to false. And so let's go ahead and play around with offset from broker. So we're going to set that back to false. So again, you're going to see the broker time show up below. And so we click true at 9:24 p.m. We're sticking on the p.m. And again, of course, you can go back to 24-hour if you want. But let's say we like the AM PM nomenclature and we want to offset our broker time. Pretty straightforward, right? Either plus or minus. Now, for those of you who haven't done the mental calisthenics on translating from GMT, broker time, and all the rest, just know that broker time typically is oriented towards X number of hours, typically behind GMT. GMT is Greenwich Mean Time. It's around London, England, and it is, of course, otherwise known as the prime meridian. Every clock in the world is basically oriented towards prime meridian. So the brokers typically orient towards plus, usually minus, 2 to 3 to 4 hours, and I've included in the manual some representative different brokers for you. But if you like to do that in terms of working off of your broker time and creating your own manual offsets, this is where you do it. What I was going to say is most are negative because we're behind. Now, I'm on the Pacific Standard West Coast time. I know I'm roughly 10 hours behind what FXCM is, and that's why I would put in a minus 10. Now, you remember it was roughly 11:27 or so on my local time when I was synced to true there. So I can manually create that or synthetically create that by just reorienting back towards the broker time, but adjusting for my 10-hour offset. So you'll see again, if I click true, it's going to show my local time again. So there it is, 11:26. So you can do the same thing wherever you're at in the world if you want to stay hardwired, so to speak, back into your broker time. But of course, a lot of people want to get away from that, and so that's why we have this set with the local time. But I just wanted to show you how the offset from broker works. And of course, this works plus or minus. And the other exciting thing about this, and I had some requests for this, there are some time zones in the world which, believe it or not, are not even increments of 1 hour, plus or minus, whether you're in relation to the broker or GMT or anything. And so you can now set that literally to the minute if you want to. Some that fall in that category, of course, you would just put a 30 in there, or plus or minus how many hours that is from the broker. Now you can do the same thing with the clock. So let's go back ahead to our local time true, and the same way we did it with the broker, we can do it with the offset from clock as well. So no need to get into that, works both the same way. What I was just trying to clarify was that most of these numbers are going to be negative, which means we are to the west of whether it's the broker that we're using or the GMT time. It's negative if we're west. If we're east of it, you would put this in plus. So let's say we're in Paris. I think that's a couple hours, 1 or 2 hours, I'm sure, ahead of London or GMT. So in that case, you would go plus, depending upon where your broker is. If you're west of them, you would go plus. If you're east, you go minus. Okay, so let's move ahead. Print month once a day. Why would we want to do this? Well, if you look down below, again, I started off with a look which emulates the native time axis. And as you can see, it shows the month every single time the time plots. Well, that gets kind of gaudy, overwhelming. You'd have a lot more information there than you need. If you just want to see the bare minimum, you don't need to see the month printing every single time, right? So this allows you to back that off. By clicking true, it only shows the month once per day. So let's just go ahead and say true on that, and there you go. A lot more space in between. And so the once a day, typically, if you're only running a 1 minute chart, typically you certainly don't have more than a day's worth of data on one chart. Maybe if you crunch it way up, you might be able to see more than once a day. Actually, still not once. Well, actually, right at the end there, yeah, we caught that. So depending upon your how many bars you have, you may see the month showing more than once on your chart. Or of course, if you have an hourly or a 4-hour, you're going to see the month show up more than once. But the bottom line is, if you're only showing 1 day's worth of data, it'll default down to the lower left side of the chart. Okay. Now, let's say you want to distinguish that a little bit more. In other words, the day of the month is showing up, of course, numerically. And so, if you want to be really, really clean and concise about never confusing that with the time that's showing up, then it gives you an opportunity as well to change the color. So I went ahead and I'm going to change the month color to this kind of a gold color there, whatever that is, orange. Okay, so let's click OK, and that's what that is. Now you see it showing up really nice below there. I'm going to actually change that, I think, to green because I'm going to do some other things with some background colors here. Okay, so there we go. The month is now showing up as lime green. Okay, pretty straightforward. Of course, you can change the font of both the time and the month will show as the same exact font, but the font color for the actual time, we can go in and modify that as well if we want. So let's go ahead and we'll make that canary yellow, which just says yellow. So there you go. So we're showing things real nice and clean on our charts. For some of you, that may make a big difference in your trading. For others, maybe not. But it allows you to work with a smaller font size by being able to make some of these colors stand out a little bit more. Okay, so let's say we want to go to a larger font size, though. This will get into some of the other aspects of the functionality on the indicator. Let's say we want to make that quite a bit bigger. Let's go with a font size of 10. Now watch what happens down below when I click OK. Alright, it's not real obvious, but it's kind of cut off there a little bit, isn't it? I want to talk about this a little bit. When you apply the indicator first time onto your chart, typically it's going to show up really kind of expanded, sort of like that. When you first put it on and you had to adjust that. And for those of you that have been using MetaTrader, you know it's a simple matter, just grabbing that top left click and holding it and dragging it down and to resize that. And so that's the same thing you do with this. But built into it is also the ability to just simply double click that and it snaps into place at the optimal sizing. Now the reason I want to talk about this right now as we are changing the size of the font is if you happen to be in that double clicked or snapped mode, well it's also locked in that position. And so as a result, when you change the font size, let's just make this really obvious. I'm going to go with a 20. It's just going to completely hide it, right? And you might be sitting there saying, well, I can't move it. What is it? It's locked. Real frustrating. And next thing you know, you're emailing me and trying to figure out how you can get that thing fixed. Well, this is how you fix it, basically. Keep in mind, like I said, if you had to double click it to snap it into place, well, that's synonymous with locking it also after you snap it in place. So all you have to do is double click it again and it unlocks it. Not only well, first it looks like it snaps into place, believe it or not. I just realized that. You double click it again, it keeps it locked, but at least it snaps it into place. So you have to double click it yet again to release it. But let's say you like that, so you double click it again and it locks into place. So when you're changing your font size, just be aware you have to double click that to release it so that it actually accommodates the larger font size. So let's go ahead back to our 7 smaller size, and it does the same thing in reverse. When you go to a smaller size, you're going to want to double click that again to get it to snap into place. Okay, it's kind of tiny there, so we'll go a little bit bigger, and then I want to get into the next aspect of the visual formatting capability. Okay, I'm going to bump that up to a 9 because it's probably going to show up a little easier on the video. Okay, show bar timer. Now actually, I didn't want to jump ahead. Background color. Sorry, I did jump ahead there a little bit on you. Background color. That just changes the color of the panel or the pane, the indicator pane, where custom time axis is. So let's say we want to change that to a different color as well. This is where you do that. Now I'm going to go to actually a dark blue here, and there we go. That'll show up in place of the black background. So, and I'm going to double click that because if you remember I made the font just a little bit bigger, and so that's now been readjusted and snapped into place. So there you go. We have customized the total look of the indicator and feel. Now why would I want to change the background? Well, first of all, you might have just wanted to do it anyway because you like it to stand out a little bit better. But where it really comes in handy is if you're placing multiple instances of CTA on your chart, and so you can distinguish them with the background color. Really nice. So if we just put the basic setup on the chart, and what I want to do here is make sure I don't overcomplicate things ahead of schedule here. So let's turn off my sessions, which we're going to be coming into very quickly to show you how that all works. Now, and we're going to double click that, snaps into place. Okay, so I have two different font sizes there, which is why it doesn't line up perfect. But if you want everything to line up perfect, you have to set everything the same way. But that's where you might want to change the background color. Let's say you have 3 different applications of time axis on there. You may want them all to be a different color, right? So that's where this background color really comes in handy. You can set this up so you can show the London session and show maybe the the European and the Australian, all different colors because you want to kind of get right into, so to speak, each of those sessions, how it would look to a local trader. And so I don't want to get too bogged down into that, but I wanted to at least show you that's why you might want to change that color. And you can really distinguish the sessions from each other. So let's go ahead and remove the one instance. Now when you remove time axis, sometimes you have to toggle it between time frames, and that'll finish the removal, which I've just done. Okay, so we've got the background color, and now we're going to get into one nifty little additional feature which was requested that may be one of the reasons you liked it. And so basically what that is the ability to see a bar timer, and that's integrated right into the indicator. So I'm going to go ahead and click true on that, and that's basically a countdown timer for how much time is left on the candle that is currently forming, right? So I'm going to click true, and I'm also letting that remain positioned. The default is at the bottom, so I'm going to click OK, and there it is. It just showed up. I'm on a 5-minute chart right now, so we have 2 minutes 33 seconds left to go before the close of that bar. Now I have it shown up at the bottom, and it aligns with the hard right roughly of the currently forming candle. Now, one of the reasons for that is if you remove the space to the right of the bar, now you can see the bar time without it being cut off. There's a lot of different indicators out there, freebies and things you can pick up in various forums, which show it to the right of the candle. And if you like that, this will allow you to, in fact, position it in the same way as well, just by placing that on middle, selecting the middle drop down. And so we're going to move the time up to the top right of the bar. Now that's what we just did, and you can see a little bit of it right there. But obviously that's a problem, isn't it? It's cut off. If you want to maximize your charting space and see the bar time at the right, well, you're not going to be able to do it because it's cut off. So I'm going to put the space in there, and so there's our bar timer, right? So by virtue of placing it at the bottom, you can now at least still see your bar time while at the same time maximizing all the space on your chart. And so let's go ahead and remove that and go back on the bottom, and let's change that to a different color, make it a little more obvious. Okay, let's say light blue, and we'll make that a little bit larger as well. Okay, and we'll just give one last look at that. So the bar has just changed, and there we go. We have 58 seconds left on actually the bar didn't change. We have 58 seconds left on a 5-minute which will be the same on a 1 minute. I'm clicking that over on the 1 minute, see? And then for 15, looks like we have 5 minutes. And so it eliminates additional digits as necessary until you go up to a 4 hour. You're not going to see the hours. Obviously, if we're on a 1 hour, it's going to be less than 1 hour. So you have 20 minutes and 30 seconds left on a 1 hour chart. So there you go. Those are the basic timer functions all explained. But let's now get into the additional cool functionality, which some of you might be pretty excited about, that like to really see the sessions plotting really clean on your charts. Now, I kind of like the configuration where you see the sessions as horizontal lines. There's an indicator I grabbed some years ago somewhere in a forum, and I really like how it showed up horizontally. I like chronologically being able to see the entire session in front of me. Now, some others you may like seeing a tabular format. Others like to see a big box on the chart, and those are kind of cool. But this seemed to be the least obtrusive way of seeing the sessions, and so that's how I designed it. And I did it though so that they show up in the main charting space. And so if we simply go to the next input, which is plot sessions, and click true, your sessions will now show up on the chart. Now I'm going to remove this capability just so we can leg into this slowly to show you one by one the inputs. So there you go. I clicked OK. We're on a 1 hour chart, so everything is kind of crunched up there. But what you're looking at is the 5 main trading sessions globally showing up at the bottom of the chart there. And what they are is basically in sequence, and so they overlap. So the first session there, I have it defaulted to the magenta, which is the Australian session. From there I go to the Asian session. From there I go to the European or German session, but of course that's representative of the European. Then we go to the London session, and then the US session is in blue. Now let's say you want to start to tweak that a little bit. Now I have it set up. You can change the thickness of the bar, and I have it set up at 2 pixels. Okay. You can also adjust the space between. Now the reason for adjusting the space is, let's say you want to have it very, very skinny and minimal. So let's change it to 1 pixel, and we break it down, and there you have it, a 1 pixel, very, very subtle at the bottom of your chart. Well, the reason I put the space in there is sometimes those colors will bleed between each other when you have it down to the skinniest hairline of a horizontal line. And let's say you just want to separate those out a little bit. So that's what the space allows you to do. You can put 3, let's say, in between there, or even 2, but I'll go 3 so it shows up better on the video. So you have more of a spacing. Right, they're more obvious, so you can still stick with the fine hairline bars, but at the same time make them a little bit more distinguished from each other. So I put a space in. But let's say you just like bigger, thicker bars, and so you could do that as well, in which case the spacing is not that important. So we can reduce that down to 1. We got about a 7 thickness, which are going to be big and fat. There you go. But let's say you don't want the big fat bars, but you just want it still to be a little more obvious, and that's why I included the ability to also create a vertical line on there as well. So let's bring that down to a 3, so the bars are not going to be as obvious, but let's make it very, very distinguishable now in terms of creating the vertical bar that shows up as well. So that's where you're just going to hit that true there. Now I did skip over this one input, which we're going to come back to in a second here. So I've now designed this so that the bars are skinnier, but we're going to see a vertical line. There you go. Now you can do even skinnier if you want on the horizontal lines now that you have the vertical, so that you actually have the bare essence showing up with no chance of missing the start of a session. Now, obviously it is just the starts. It seemed like it was kind of overkill to be putting start and stop of each session in a vertical line. Hopefully that's not a big issue with your trading. Now that's an hourly chart. I can bring that down to a 15, of course, and they automatically size according to whatever bar compression you're using. Now the plot lines, the session plots I should say, do reference whatever your time is that you have running on your chart. So whether it is broker time or whether it is your local time, That's what the session times line up with. So that makes things a lot easier actually when you're setting them up, and I'm assuming that's why you like custom time access. You want everything shown on your local time. So your bars are going to line up according to your local time, and that's where you're going to set all of your parameters for your individual sessions on. So just keep that in mind as we get into that section. But one thing I did want to cover real quick here is this max days to plot. You can plot as many session uh, um, lines will plot on your chart, I should say, as far back as all the data is that, or maybe the proper way to say all the data are on your chart. And so we can, it's defaulted I think to 30 days, and so as you're scrolling back, you're going to run out at 30, but you can go all the way back to as much data as you have. If you're doing a lot of back testing on some larger time frame charts, whatever it is, just rest assured you can get it to show up. But there's no reason to have all of that showing up if you don't need it, right? You did all your back testing, your trading now. You just want to reduce as much as possible the load on your computer as is necessary. Maybe you only need to see the current day, or let's say the current week. And so you can set that, let's say, for 7 days. Okay, so now you're only going to show 7 days of back data. Make sure we keep changing that automated scroll. So there you go. We're only seeing now 7 days worth of data, right? So a lot less intense load on your processor. And some of you might be running a whole bunch of charts and different time frames. So this way you could just back it off and have only what you need showing up. Okay, so let's get into the sessions now, the plotting of the sessions. Don't be too intimidated by this. I know it can be a little overwhelming. You're looking at every single session, having to set it up, and oh my God, what's the difference from where I live and the GMT, and what is the different sessions around the world? And don't worry, this has all been made really, really easy for you. And I'm going to show you also a website which is perfectly designed, that I should say just happens to be perfectly designed to work excellent with setting up our indicator. But nonetheless, I've also tried to speed things up as well for those that at least might fall into some of the main market sessions around the globe. So let me say, for starters, the indicator out of the box is actually defaulted to Greenwich Mean Time. So when you simply apply the indicator on the chart, if you happen to live in the GMT time zone, the good news is just apply the indicator on the chart and it's going to show your sessions, your worldwide global trading sessions will come up according to your local time perfectly. Now I will say, in case there's any doubt, any question anybody might have about that, all of the global sessions, whether it's Australian, Asian, European, London, or US, they're 8-hour sessions, okay? So in the US, that's from 8 until 4. And so that's going to be the same wherever you're at in the world. And that's why they show up, obviously, as equal length bars there. So all we need to know, of course, is what the start time is, and you can automatically calculate the end time. But again, no sense even having to worry about jumping through those hoops. So I created the GMT as the default for the indicator right out of the box. But let's say you live in either a New York session or London or one of the other ones. Well, the great news is all you have to do to apply that to the chart, so all those global trading sessions are already set. Again, this one is GMT settings. But let's say you're in one of those major trading markets in the world, and I've even included the west coast of the United States as well, because, well, that's where I live, so I had to create that one. So there's actually 6 templates in there, as well as a few others like the basic setup, but those all came with your indicator. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to start to show you. You know how to apply a template. You just right click on a chart, or let's say you don't know, you right click on the chart, and that brings up your list of templates, and you just scroll down to your CTA templates, and they're all listed right there for you. So let's say you are in the London trading zone. You just go ahead and click on the template and it will apply it to your chart, and there you go. So there, if you're in the London time zone, everything is set for you now according to where you live. All right. So if you go back to the manual, and I haven't really been following along there, it just really takes a lot of time flipping back and forth. Obviously, these are all the inputs we just went through with short explanations. We're now at the session times here. But if you go through the manual and you skip ahead a little bit, what I've done here is already everything I've already talked about. In the manual, I just wanted to say, even though all of the explanations are given real nice, short, and concise in the actual graph, the diagram I created there, I had to elaborate a little bit on each of the some of the individual inputs, which I've already done on the video for you. So again, if you don't like reading, I just saved you a lot of reading because I elaborated on the broker time, the clock time, and the different offsets and everything else. But we jump ahead to the sessions now, which is what I'm talking about. I make it real easy here for you as well to actually find which template you want to use. I've created three different, a couple different ways I should say of looking at it, right? So you can just look at your geographic area or the time zone. And this is the template. You're going to choose one of these based upon where you're at. So again, going back to our actual chart, you're going to right click on that and then find the template that coincides with the area that you are at in the world and just apply that. So I'm going to go ahead and put my, keep in mind I put on a London template, so it's actually not going to show properly because I'm on the Pacific coast of the US, right? So I would want to choose, of course, the LA template, and so that's what's on there now. Now, one thing you might be noticing, sometimes when you apply a template, the indicator doesn't show up at the bottom. That's a little bug that it's not a huge issue. Maybe in the future, when we get to the next version, I might try to work that out. But it's not a huge issue. All you have to do is just toggle to a different time frame, and it will immediately show up. So we are now looking at everything set on the Pacific Coast that is proper for myself out here. It's 11:56 a.m. right now in the morning session, and so if we put our cursor on there, and this is a 15-minute chart, by the way, so we're showing the start of the last bar which started forming, which is the 11:45 bar, but it's 11:56, and so let's go ahead to a 1 minute to see that exactly. So there we go. I'm reading my clock wrong. I can't read it's 11:51. I actually have a different clock set that I was referencing there, but it's 11:51, and so that's on my computer. So so we of course lose our session plots there because I've gone down to up to 1 minute, but we're back over to a 30-minute. And so again, just go ahead and apply the template that's according to your time frame. Now, either time zone, but let's say you don't fall into one of those areas, and that's what I want to cover right now. Most likely you don't. So there's again 7 different areas, whether you put the GMT standard out of the box indicator on there or one of the templates. You don't have to do anything else at all. It's all set up for you. And if you put your clock to, well, I shouldn't say it doesn't matter, because in your template it's already set to your local time zone. And so if we go into the indicator, which has been applied with a template, like I say, sync to clock is already set to true. So it's going to orient towards your local time automatically. It's going to hide the main axis. It's going to set AM, PM. We're not going to have any offsets in there. And of course, if you want, you can go in there and tweak the colors and the font size and all the rest, but at least you have sort of the heavy lifting's already been done for you. But that's what we're going to get into now if you're not in one of those areas. Again, all this is in the manual, but I'm going to go through this now and show you sort of in hands-on, looking over my shoulder here if you want to really see how to do this. So you want to avoid reading the manual. Well, here's basically all you need to do. I show in the manual a website, and again, I've already talked about it. This website is so slick that all you have to do is literally put in your time zone, and it will populate the 5 major markets right down below here. It'll show you the open time and the close time. Now it says GMT here because in the manual I chose the setting, which when I went to the web page I chose GMT. The main thing I want to say here is the actual website, it should be clickable in your PDF and it'll just send you right there, but if you put this manually in, you should be able to cut and paste this from the PDF. But in case you can't do that and you type this in, I just wanted to make sure you noted here, this is not a standard www dot website. You need to put in http:// just as it shows here, but sometimes we have a way of glossing over this stuff and then we're scratching our head, why can't the website come up? It's the proper website as you see it here. Just make sure you put it in exactly as you see it, and don't forget the period between forex and timezoneconverter.com. Anyway, that will bring you to you see I'm doing a little checking out some binary stuff here. Let me bring you to that website. Okay, back with you now. So this is, again, the manual as you are looking at a screenshot of the website, which I have listed there for you. Here's the website, and as you can see, it is the exact same grid that I was just showing you. Now, I had chosen GMT, so we'll go back for consistency's sake and show the GMT. So there it is, and it's really cool because it highlights the current session, which is active. And so we are in the middle of the New York session. But actually, we're just moved into the afternoon of the New York session where we're at right now. So each of these times, this is what's really slick here. All you have to do, let's go back over to the indicator to set up. So it doesn't matter what template you used on your chart, because all you have to do is open it up and go to each of these market sessions here and replace these times however you want to show the configuration. Now I have them set up so that they obviously there's like a stair step look and feel. Now you may not want to do that, or you may want to eliminate one altogether. If you want to eliminate one, all you have to do is change that. Either go to 0, 0 in all the inputs, or change it to your background color. I'll show you that real quick. So that's the first session here. So you see how I just got rid of the magenta session, or what was the Australian session. So all you have to do is change the color to your background color, and that'll eliminate it. So if all you want to do is, let's say, show your London or US, again, that's how you do it. But let's go ahead and let that show back up again, so I can continue with the instruction here. That was magenta. Then you get, of course, choose whatever you want. So here's the only thing, is when you go to the website and you grab these times here, we do have to translate these to military time, because that's how the indicator is set up. Now, even though it shows it in AM PM, and that's one of the great features and benefits of CTA, when you set the trading sessions, though, this is back to military time. Don't worry about it, even if you have it set up to AM PM, though, to plot. Even though you're putting it in military time here, the chart will still show up in AM PM. But again, you just need to convert this, whatever you see on the website, to AM to 24 hours. So I'm in the Pacific Standard Time. But the cool thing about this chart is they give you 4 different methods to choose your time zone, and they put the top trading sessions right at the top, which is really slick. And so you can just apply that if you want to see what they are. But let's say you're in one of these other areas here. It lists them all geographically, but it also shows them in relation to GMT, and it also shows the in the plus or minus GMT, and it also shows the name of the time zone. For example, there's Pacific, there's the US, there's UTC, so it's pretty much all there, which is very cool. So pick the one that best applies to where you live, bring it up on your chart, and like I say, then all you have to do is convert this to military. So I've even provided in the manual the ability to convert your AMP. And by the way, these are the 4 different methods in which they allow you to decipher where your zone is that you live. So hopefully one of those is going to be real easy for you to pick out. And then once you've done that and you've clicked on it, all you have to do now is take your AM PM times that are showing up on the chart that they've made on the website, and you convert that over using this military converter right here. You convert it back to 24-hour time. You go back to the indicator, you double click on the inputs, and then just put your military time. Just make sure you have your colon in there, and everything exactly the way it looks, and it'll have no problem plotting. So there you go. That will adjust CTA for wherever you live in the world, and have the sessions come up beautiful for your local time. Alright, we're just about down to the end of the setup on the indicator, and hope all this is making sense and going real sweet and easy for you. We're actually getting this entire tutorial done in less than an hour. So all I want to cover now is the very, very last thing, and then a few little troubleshooting items and getting the most out of your indicator now. So let's go back over to the manual and scroll down to the remaining items. As you can see, I've just gone through some of the plotting, and I put a nifty little thing in here, some fun facts here for GMT, so you can actually see where it is on the globe and on the map, what it looks like. And some people get a kick when they're traveling and going by and taking a picture right next to the clock over there in Greenwich, England, which sits right above the River Thames there. I guess that's how you say it. Okay, so the last part of this has to do, or I should say as far as the inputs go, before we elaborate a little bit on getting the most out of CTA, is the GMT offset hours. You can choose to show that on your chart if you so desire. Now my original intention was to do this so that everybody would be so easy and simple to simply see where they were at in relation to GMT, but we decided to do something a little bit different there. This is actually sort of a misnomer in what we're showing here. That is not an automatic readout by any means. That is in fact designed to show what you plug in as your GMT offset. So I actually should name that something different. Don't want you to get too confused, but this all has to do with one bit of functionality which we created, which was just for a rare situation which might come up, and that is this. If you purchased CTA, or let's say you already own it, but you apply it to a broker platform that it has never been on before, or I should say recently it hasn't been on, and you do that during a time when there's no data coming in to your terminal. So that would of course be during off hours, or maybe when your internet connection is down, right? If you apply it to a chart, well, because CTA has not had a chance to capture any information that has been coming in live, which it utilizes to then reference all the other functionality. If the data has never been coming in, it hasn't had a chance to do that. It doesn't grab what's on your platform to do things, certainly not in the I should say if you choose sync to clock, it won't do it. It can't do it, and that's all I'll say about it. The programmer could probably confuse you thoroughly on this if you really wanted to be, but basically I'm even confused on it. And so the bottom line here is we only created this so that if you do apply the indicator during that time, well, you can sort of manually override the indicator by plugging in, if you happen to know what your GMT offset is, by plugging that number in there, it'll show up for what you've plugged in, and then you default the indicator back to, you have to leave your clock, and then it will show up at what your offset is and reset your indicator. So at least on the weekends, I should say if you apply it during the time when there's no live data, which we're assuming is a weekend, of course, at least before Sunday. On the West Coast, Sunday is still a weekend, obviously, but the market opens for us out here. Okay, and that'll show up for you. Now you can change the look and feel of that, just like everything else, the font and the size. And so that's the remaining 5 offsets on the indicator have to do with setting up really what you're manually placing in there so that you can fire up your charts on a time that normally wouldn't allow you to do that. Now I'm going to make a suggestion here. Don't even mess with that. If you simply set this up to not sync the clock over the weekend, the indicator will reference your broker time and enable you to see your indicator, as far as I can tell. This might be one last area we need to tweak and work with, and so if you find that there's a bug there and having some issues with it, I apologize. It was just taking too long to get this thing designed and put into use, and I figured a lot of users out there would have no problem with this at all. And of course, all you have to do, if there is an issue with that, you really need it for your trading, right? And so the moment your first tick comes in when the market opens on Sunday or Monday morning, wherever you're at, don't worry, the indicator will kick in, everything will start working beautiful. This is just for that rare instance, like I say, when there's no data. If you apply it on a platform it's never been applied to before. Otherwise, if you've been running it on your platform and the weekend comes, no problem. It'll show everything beautifully. And so again, it's just for those sort of virgin installations where this comes into play. And if there are any issues with it, we'll be working this out anyway. So that's what those last 5 inputs have to do with. And so probably it's not even going to be an issue for you anyway. You slice that. Okay, the last remaining issues I wanted to talk about here are some minor troubleshooting stuff, and then getting the most out of CTA. So here we are. I just wanted to show some of the broker offsets of some of the more popular platforms, and so those are all listed for you there if you did want to get into some of that functionality. Okay, getting the most out of CTA. All right, I just wanted to cover the aspect that I already covered, one of them, which of course was double clicking it to size it into place, so we don't have to cover that. Okay, another thing is the obstruction of information on your native axis. I don't have to spend too much time on this. I did it actually in one of the promotional videos, and so this is not a huge biggie, but since I stated in the manual, I just want to say it right here. If you like looking at volumes, for example, on your native chart, well, those of course are going to show up in the bottom because CTA shows up in the main chart space. And if you have your actual sessions set up to be very thick, well, you could be obscuring some of your volume data. Am I right? And so let's say you don't want to obscure that data. So I'm going to thicken up the sessions here. We'll go with a 6, and there's our volume data. Well, easy. Just like any indicator in MetaTrader, all you have to do is go back. I'm sorry, I'm going to the indicator. Go to the properties section and make sure you have chart on foreground chosen. And what it'll do then is bring your volumes to the front so that our indicator is beside it. So even though we're in the main charting window, that's great because you just place those behind any of the visual information and it won't obstruct anything. And you may want to show your sessions up higher, and that's another thing that may come into play, is you certainly again don't want to block out your actual price bars, right? Let's say you really like those sessions showing up thick, and I'm going to be kind of extreme here, but just to prove the point here, as long as your chart is set on foreground, your bars will print in front of your actual session bars. You're not obscuring any of that. Okay, so that was one of the other aspects that's in getting the most out of CTA. I'm going to go ahead and reduce these back down to a realistic size, and there we go. And I'll get rid of the volume. There's lots of volume indicators out there. Okay, so that is how you get rid of the obstructing aspect by simply placing show chart on foreground. Okay, covered all in the manual. If you want to only see the time and you don't even want to see the month, piece of cake. You just go into the indicator, and the same way we did it with the plot, the sessions, if we didn't want to see a session, you just change it to the color of your background. Well, that's the same thing that you do if you want to get rid of your month plotting. Right now we have the month plotted in this gold color, so look down below. If I just change that to black, obviously it's going to disappear, right? So there you go. All you're seeing is the time now on your chart. So that's one other little freebie. No extra charge for that. Getting kind of tired. It was a long video. We're almost done. Alright, so I'm going to change the month color back to something a little bit more visible. Okay, and locating of the sessions, I wanted to cover that real quickly here. Now let's say you want to see multiple sessions on your chart. And so let's go ahead and place custom CTA on there 3 more times. Okay, you're going to wind up getting a lot of conflicts, obviously. Okay, so you double click the sizes, double click, double click. You have a gazillion trading sessions showing up here. Well, first of all, you want to get rid of all the ones you don't want, right? And so from the top down is how they show up on your chart. So you basically just say false for each of the trading sessions. And what will happen is the one which is at the bottom in your list of your indicator list is the one that shows up on the bottom as well. So you want to turn off all the ones that are everything but your lowermost one, because the lowest one is the one which is plotting the lowest on your chart. Now, right now, it's kind of confusing, so let me just finish this up. Okay, so there you go. The session which is plotting on the chart is the one which is the lowest indicator. But all these are exactly the same time. And so you can, of course, go in there and change according to your offset. If you want to literally create a different session sort of internal to what it would look like to a local trader. So let's say you're in America, but you want to trade the overnight sessions. Let's say you work a day job and you trade at night and you're able to actually get enough sleep. You can go in there and actually set up the indicators so that, for example, on this lowest one, we can design all of our sessions so that they emulate what's going on according to the local time in London or wherever that session is that you want to trade, and hence have those show up on your chart. So you would do that with the sessions if you wanted to show the session on your chart, but the main thing I wanted to show you was you would use the offset to create that differential. And so I'm about 10 hours, I'm actually 8 hours difference from the European, but I'm just going to throw this on you real quick. I'm not trying to be exactly accurate, but I want to show you how that changes, of course, as you already know, in the indicator. So there you go. The lower indicator would be emulating my European reference, and then I might want to go ahead and again distinguish the background color to make sure when I'm looking at it I'm not getting confused with my local time. So there you go. So my bottom CTA is showing London time, and if I'm getting into actually trading that session, now I can look at the bottom and see exactly what time it would be according to a local as I'm in the middle of that trading session. I don't want to bog this down too much getting into all that, but I think you get the basic idea, right? Now, also know that the pop-up shows exactly on whichever indicator you're on where your cursor is placed. That's the one that shows as the pop-up. Now again, I covered it a little earlier. If you're running your cursor around inside the chart, you might be a little put off by the fact that you don't see anything showing up below. If you're in the native axis, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the lowest one here and I'm going to say false, so you're actually going to see along with all these now the MetaTrader axis. There is the MetaTrader axis showing up at the bottom in all of its glory. And so if you want to see the time pop up, you have to look at the crosshair there. If you want to see custom time axis, it'll show up as well. But again, if you put it on the cursor, you can't see the time pop up. But if you want to see the time showing by virtue of running your cursor up in the chart window, pardon me, all you have to do is place the cursor up there and then touch the control button, which is the lower left key on your keyboard, and guess what? Everything shows up real wonderful there. Now I have everything set pretty much the same, so it's not that impressive, but guaranteed if you had offsets set on each one of these instances to reflect different trading sessions around the world or whatever you want to do, they all show up exactly to the bar what the time is that's being referenced there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just put a standard template back on here so we can wrap this up. And I want to cover, last but not least, some of the troubleshooting. Now here again is a great segue into that because I used a template to apply the indicator, and we're coming real close to 1 hour here, so I think I'm actually going to be able to just about wrap this up. Again, one of the issues is, as you can see, I used a template to apply it. It didn't show up on the chart, no problem. Just toggle the chart to a different time frame and that will fix that. So we're back at our manual right now, and I cover that in print. Yes, the big thing I wanted to talk about here is what if your indicator is not showing up properly with all this fancy functionality here when you have it set as sync to clock? Well, this is pretty much by definition should be obvious what might be going on. If you have this set to sync to clock and your time is wrong, and you're looking at another clock, well, obviously what you want to do is just check your computer clock and see if your computer clock is off. I'm not going to get into all that here, but typically all you have to do is double click on the actual time that shows up on your computer, and I don't have the viewer set up here properly to record this, but you can just go in there and make sure the clock is accurate. I don't know what to tell you if you have the indicator set to sync to clock and it's showing up wrong if your computer clock is correct. That one there, hopefully I won't come across that, but if it does come up, get a hold of me. We'll see if we can figure out what the issue is. But that could be the only reason that that could be off, is your sync to clock, or I should say your clock is off. Now why might your clock be off? You might have an older computer which it didn't set automatically, which all the newer computers do, whether they use GPS or whatever, they hook into your internet, wireless or what have you. But maybe it's an older computer and you never set it the way it should have been set, and it certainly hasn't done so automatically. And so just be aware of that if it's showing up wrong. And again, you can just override it and go back to sync to broker and just use the offsets, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of CTA and the convenience of it all. But I don't think that's really going to ever come up, and I wanted to include on the manual just in case. All right. Okay, one of the last issues that may happen, and this is very, very basic. I do cover it in the essential installation instructions, which is you've applied it to your chart. You might have applied it manually, didn't use the automated installer, which you may or may not have gotten depending upon when you purchased CTA. If you apply it to the chart and it doesn't show up properly, you want to make sure all your DLL inputs are set properly on the indicator itself. And the way you do that is you just open it and you go to the Common tab, and there you'll see these two check boxes. I've seen different versions over the years where this appears a little bit differently, but it most likely is going to show up like this for you. Just make sure both of those are checked, okay? And usually 98% of the time that's the cause for it not showing up on your chart, is those are not checked properly. Now you may have MetaTrader itself set up so that every time you apply an indicator, they're forever coming up with those unchecked. Just know that those are in your settings, up in the tools part, up in your menu, and you bring up, you click on tools in case you don't want that to keep happening with other indicators, and then down to options, and that brings up this dialog box, and you're going to go over to expert advisors, believe it or not, even though this is an indicator we're dealing with. Make sure allow real imports to be another, check that right there, and then it'll come up checked typically in the indicator as well. And aside from that, can't tell you what else you could possibly do, but just check those DLL inputs to make sure that they're checked properly. Alright, and usually that fires it up without a problem. So that's pretty much the rest of the troubleshooting. I've covered everything in context as I've been going through the indicator, and so that pretty much takes care of everything. So again, I really welcome you aboard and using CTA. I hope it really just makes your trading life a lot more comfortable and convenient for you. And so welcome aboard and make a lot of money. All right. See you later.